If everything is empty, if the self is an illusion, the world is a projection, and time is without substance, then why get out of bed? Why meditate? Why help others? Why say a single word? If everything is ultimately void, why bother at all? This is not just a philosophical question, it's existential. If misunderstood, it leads to apathy, confusion, and nihilism. If understood, it unlocks the purest, most fearless form of action. I'm silent flame, and this is a fire that burns through meaning, only to show you what meaning actually is. Let's begin by clearing the fog. Emptiness, in Buddhism, is one of the most misunderstood words in all of philosophy. It does not mean that nothing exists. It does not mean that life is pointless. And it does not mean that morality or compassion are illusions. The Sanskrit word is shunyata. It means empty of inherent existence, not empty of existence entirely. This distinction matters more than most people realize. To say something is empty in this sense means it doesn't exist independently, it doesn't exist permanently, it doesn't exist unchangingly, and it doesn't exist from its own side. But it does exist as a phenomenon arising in relationship. Your thoughts exist, but they arise because of conditions. Your self exists, but only as a process. The table you sit at, the body you inhabit, all of it is real enough to appear, but not real in the way you think it is. Emptiness is not a negation. It's a liberation from false solidity. Let's look at how this plays out across the major Buddhist schools, Theravada, Pali Canon. In the earliest Buddhist texts, the concept closest to emptiness is anatta, no self. The Buddha didn't use the word shunyata often, but the logic is embedded. He said, form is not self, feeling is not self, perception, formations, consciousness, none of these are self. Why? Because they're all impermanent, dependent, and subject to suffering. Theravada views emptiness as the absence of a permanent, unchanging core. It doesn't deny experience. It dismantles ownership of experience. When you see this clearly, clinging falls away, and with it, suffering. Mahayana, middle way school. Nagarjuna, the father of the Madhyamaka school, took this further. He said, not only is the self empty, everything is empty. He taught, there is no phenomenon that arises independently. Therefore, all things are empty, of svabhava, inherent nature. Even the Buddha's teachings, even emptiness itself, is empty. This is radical, but not nihilistic. Nagarjuna wrote, because all things are empty, all things are possible. That sentence is the key to action. Yogacara, mind-only school. Yogacara doesn't deny emptiness, but reframes it through consciousness. It teaches that what we call reality is a projection of mind, not solipsism, but structured perception. Here, emptiness is understood as the absence of duality between subject and object. Why is this important? Because when you drop dualism, you don't fall into nothingness. You fall into non-separation. From this view, acting in the world is not about helping others. It's about responding to manifestations of your own mind. Summary of all. So across schools, we find a common core. There is no solid, unchanging self. All things arise from causes and conditions. Nothing stands alone. Emptiness is not absence, but interdependence. Which brings us back to the burning question, if all is interdependent, why act at all? Isn't action too just another illusion? Now we arrive at the heart of the question. If the self is an illusion, if time is relative, if morality is conditioned, and if all forms are empty, why bother? Why get up and practice? Why teach? Why serve? Shouldn't full realization mean stillness? withdrawal, total neutrality. This is the great temptation of nihilism, and it arises at the edge of emptiness, the trap of misunderstanding shunyata. Many practitioners and teachers have fallen into the abyss of false emptiness. They say, nothing matters, nothing is real, compassion is a game, ethics is a story, desire is a wave, and they sit detached, cold, cynical. But that's not enlightenment, that's ego in emptiness's robes. Real realization doesn't erase the world, it liberates your relationship to it. After awakening under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha could have walked away. He could have sat in perfect silence until death. And for a moment, he almost did. The texts say he hesitated. He saw the depth of what he had realized and doubted whether anyone could understand it. But then he looked again and saw beings with dust in their eyes, struggling, searching, capable of awakening. And so he rose, and so he taught, not out of duty, but from compassion rooted in clarity. He knew the world was empty, but he also saw that suffering was real enough to relieve. In Mahayana, we find the Bodhisattva, the one who has seen through the illusion of self, tasted the bliss of release, but returns to the marketplace. Why? Because even though there are no separate beings, there is appearance of separation, and as long as suffering appears, so must compassion. The Bodhisattva knows there is no fixed self or other, but doesn't use that as an excuse. He uses it as freedom to act without fear, pride, or agenda. The Lotus Sutra's parable. The Lotus Sutra tells a story of a physician whose children are sick. He gives them medicine, but some are too confused to take it. So he pretends to leave, then returns, and offers the cure again. That physician is the Buddha, the sick children are us, and the medicine is action, skillful means in an impermanent world. But how does action work when there's no self behind it? Simple. Action doesn't come from ego, it arises from clarity. Think of a mirror. It reflects perfectly, but doesn't grasp. It responds, but doesn't identify. The awakened mind is like this. It acts, but doesn't cling. It feels, but isn't bound. It responds, but doesn't react. This is karma without karma, action without the egoic residue that binds it to future becoming. To act without believing in a self. This is not denial. This is liberation. Most of what we do in life is reactive. We move because of fear, hunger, image, reward. Even our generosity is often laced with subtle craving for approval, for righteousness, for belonging. But the awakened mind sees through this. It doesn't eliminate emotion. It transforms its root. When craving dissolves, what remains is a silent clarity. From that silence, action flows, but without baggage. No personal agenda, no performance, no clinging to results. True action is choiceless. In Zen, there's a teaching. When the self disappears, action becomes natural. That doesn't mean passive surrender. It means you chop wood and carry water, not because you must, but because that's what this moment expresses through you. It's like a flute through which wind moves. The flute doesn't decide to sing. It simply becomes a vessel for sound. One of the greatest misunderstandings in Buddhism is this, that emptiness leads to detachment, that no self means no love, that absence of identity equals absence of care. This is false. It is precisely because there is no self that the boundary between me and you dissolves. And when that boundary falls, compassion arises effortlessly. Because your suffering is no longer distant, your fear, your confusion, your pain, it is not yours. It is the field we all move through, the wisdom of the open heart. Real compassion is not pity, it's not rescue, it's not I am whole and you are broken. It is. I see your pain as mine because there's no true division. I act not to fix you, but because suffering wants to end through me. This is action beyond morality. It's not about rules. It's about resonance. And that kind of action doesn't burn you out because it isn't based on a self that needs to save. Write your questions in the comments. You give me a like and a follow. I'll give you an answer. Now let's talk about the danger, because there is a trap in this path, a very attractive one. It goes like this: nothing matters, everything is empty, why bother? And with that phrase, people check out. They become frozen, detached, dead while alive. They confuse apathy with wisdom, distance with equanimity, disinterest with clarity. This is not dharma, it's denial. The Buddha didn't sit under the Bodhi tree and say, whatever. He said, I have found the deathless. I will share it with the world. He acted not because the world was ultimately real, but because suffering was functionally real, because beings were hurting, and because freedom was possible. Apathy is not liberation. It is a prison made of cold ideas. So if you are asking, if everything is empty, why act? The answer is because emptiness moves. It does not sit still. It dances. It forms. It flows into compassion, laughter, tears, action. When you realize that all things are empty, you do not withdraw. You become transparent. And through that transparency, the world shines. You become the echo of silence, the breath of clarity, the hand that moves without claiming. Let's talk about karma, because here lies another paradox. Buddhism teaches that karma, intentional action, shapes future experience, that everything you do plants a seed, that action has consequence. But Buddhism also teaches that there is no solid self performing the action. So how can karma exist without a doer? Dependent origination as the bridge. The answer lies in dependent origination, the 12 nidanas, the chain of cause and effect, not just in external events, but in the mind itself. Ignorance, formations, consciousness, name and form, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, becoming, birth, suffering. This sequence doesn't need a fixed I. It only needs conditions. Karma is not carried by a soul. It flows through the system like echoes in a canyon. What you call your actions are part of a process, not a person. Many people fear that no self means no accountability, but it's the opposite. When you drop identity, you don't lose responsibility. You gain freedom from justification. You no longer act from my beliefs, but from insight into interdependence. You no longer do good to feel good. You do it because that's what the moment requires. Action without actor, not passive but precise, like a master archer who no longer calculates every shot because he has become the movement itself. When there's no ego to defend, you stop wasting motion. When there's no story to fulfill, you stop forcing roles. And what remains is the cleanest possible action, flowing from clarity, not confusion. Nagarjuna said, all things are like illusions. They appear, but they have no essence. So the wise live in this dream, knowing it is a dream. Does that make them apathetic? Number it makes them fearless. If the world is a play, they play without clinging. If it's a storm, they dance in the rain. Lila, sacred play in the illusion. Some Eastern traditions speak of Lila, the divine play, where the universe is a stage and consciousness is the actor and the witness. To see through the illusion is not to exit the stage. It is to know your role is fluid and to perform it with grace. This is not escapism. This is lucid living. 1. The mirror. Like a mirror that reflects without judgment. You act, but you don't add narrative. You help, but you don't grasp identity as a helper. 2. The wind. Like wind that moves leaves. You cause ripples, but you don't control the outcome. 3. The musician. Like a musician improvising with others. You respond to the moment without planning each note, and the result is harmony, not from control, but from awareness. If everything is impermanent, if all form is empty, if the self is a fiction, then does helping anyone even mean anything? Here's the truth. In the ultimate view, yes, all things are void of essence, but in the relative view, beings suffer, children starve, minds break. The mistake is to collapse one view into the other. The wisdom lies in holding both. The two truths doctrine. In Mahayana Buddhism, this is known as the two truths, ultimate truth. All is empty, beyond labels, beyond duality, conventional truth. Suffering exists, time flows, actions have results. You can't live only in ultimate truth. If you try, you fall into nihilism. You can't live only in conventional truth. If you try, you get trapped in samsara. The bodhisattva walks with one foot in each. Sometimes people ask, if I'm meditating alone, in silence, not helping anyone, is that selfish? But here's the truth. Sitting in stillness, when done with pure awareness, is action. It's a tuning of the whole field, a return to balance. Because you're not sitting just for yourself. You're sitting to become an instrument of clarity. And that clarity ripples into how you speak, how you walk, how you meet the world. So don't ever think the invisible is inactive. Stillness is not stagnation. It is the source of all wise motion. Another modern illusion is that action needs a goal, that success is about metrics, that helping only matters if it works. But Buddhist action isn't result-based. It's process-based, intention-based, presence-based. You act because it is in alignment with clarity, not because it guarantees transformation. Not for me, not for you, for the Dharma. The Bodhisattva doesn't say, I will save the world. She says, I will walk with the world, even if it never changes. She doesn't fix others. She serves them. And sometimes service is silent, invisible, unrecorded. But in the field of karma, no moment of compassion is ever lost. When you act without attachment, without ego, without needing thanks, without needing to be seen, your impact grows in ways you will never measure. You speak a kind word, and someone doesn't give up that night. You plant a seed, and someone awakens 30 years later. You sit in silence, and the world shifts one fraction closer to balance. But you never know, and you don't need to, because real awakening is not about results. It's about alignment with emptiness that breathes love. Sometimes people ask, if I'm meditating alone, in silence, not helping anyone, is that selfish? But here's the truth. Sitting in stillness, when done with pure awareness, is action. It's a tuning of the whole field, a return to balance. Because you're not sitting just for yourself. You're sitting to become an instrument of clarity. And that clarity ripples into how you speak, how you walk, how you meet the world. So don't ever think the invisible is inactive. Stillness is not stagnation. It is the source of all wise motion. The Buddha is sometimes called the Tathagata, the one thus gone or the one thus come. He doesn't act from personality. He acts as what the moment calls for. If someone needs fire, he becomes fire. If someone needs silence, he becomes silence. If someone needs a lie to awaken from illusion, he offers skillful means without attachment. This is not manipulation. This is clarity in motion. It's what happens when the sense of I dissolves and only response remains. The flame burns, not because it wants to, but because that's what fire does. The awakened one does not choose to serve. They simply are service, because nothing separates them from the suffering they see. They don't wait to act. They don't calculate. They don't cling. They respond precisely, compassionately, and completely, then let go. There's a phrase in the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. This is not poetic fluff. It's the answer to this whole question. When you truly see emptiness, you see that action is not separate from stillness. That doing arises from being, but without grasping. You act, and yet no one acts. You speak, and yet no one speaks. And the world shifts, not because you forced it, but because you moved in alignment with reality. So, if all is empty, why act? Because you are not outside of emptiness. You are its expression. And when you realize this, you stop asking what action is for. You just move with the current of clarity. You feed the hungry, not because it will save the world, but because the bowl is empty and you have food. You speak the truth, not because it will be heard, but because it is no longer possible to lie. You love, not because love will fix everything, but because love is what remains when the self dissolves. I'm silent flame, and I don't want you to believe in emptiness. I want you to walk it, to let it move your hands, soften your gaze, and dissolve your need to know why. There is no why. There is just this breath, this step, this moment, and the chance to meet it without clinging. Subscribe if you're ready to let go of answers and live the question itself. Comment below. What would you do if you no longer needed a reason?